I want to start with something that might sound a little uncomfortable. Because when people hear high IQ, they imagine advantages, clarity, success, better decisions. They imagine a mind that works better. And in some ways, that's true. But there's another side to it, one that almost no one talks about. Because having a mind that can think deeply also means having a mind that doesn't stop. You don't just see the obvious. You see the layers, the implications, the possibilities. You don't just think about what is. You think about what could be, what might go wrong, what might be misunderstood, what might unfold in ways no one else is considering. And that sounds like a strength. Until it isn't. Because at a certain point, thinking stops being a tool and becomes an environment. You don't step into it. You live in it. And that creates the first struggle. Overthinking. Not the casual kind, not, I can't decide what to eat, but the kind where a simple decision branches into 10 possibilities, where every choice has consequences you can already imagine, where every outcome feels like something you should have predicted. And because you can see more, you feel responsible for more, so you hesitate, you analyze, you wait for clarity. But clarity doesn't come. Because the more you think, the more variables appear. And eventually, you're not making better decisions, you're just delaying them. There's also something else that happens. Something quieter. You start to feel disconnected. Because your mind doesn't operate at the same pace as most conversations. While others are reacting, you're already several steps ahead. You've analyzed the context, the subtext, the possible interpretations. So when you respond, it can feel like you're speaking a different language. Not because you're trying to, but because you're seeing something others aren't. And over time, that creates distance. Not always visible, not always obvious, but felt. Because connection often depends on shared understanding. And when your internal process becomes too complex, it becomes harder to translate. So sometimes you simplify. You say less than you're thinking. You hold back. You adjust. And that leads to another struggle. Feeling misunderstood. Not because people don't care, but because they don't see the full picture you're experiencing, and explaining it feels exhausting. So instead, you keep it to yourself. And that isolation doesn't come from being alone. It comes from being unmatched. There's also a deeper layer to this. Expectation. Not always from others, but from yourself. When your mind is capable of more, you expect more, better decisions, better outcomes, better control. And when reality doesn't match that, it feels like failure, even when objectively, it isn't. Because your standard isn't based on what's realistic. It's based on what you can imagine. And what you can imagine is often far beyond what's necessary. So you end up in a constant gap between potential and reality, and living in that gap is exhausting. There's also something else that rarely gets talked about: sensitivity, not emotional weakness, but awareness. You pick up on small changes, tone shifts, subtle signals, unspoken tension, things most people don't consciously notice. And once you notice them, you can't unsee them. So your brain tries to make sense of it. Why did they say that? Why did their tone change? What does that mean? And suddenly, a simple interaction becomes something much bigger. Not because it is, but because your mind expands it. And again, you're not wrong. You're just deeper. But depth comes with weight because the more you see, the more you carry. And over time, that can become tiring. Not physically, mentally. Constant analysis, constant awareness, constant processing. So your brain looks for something it rarely finds: stillness, not silence. But a place where it doesn't have to keep going, where it doesn't have to solve, predict, or understand everything. And that's where things begin to shift, because the goal isn't to think less. That doesn't work. The goal is to stop expecting your mind to solve things it was never designed to solve. Complete certainty, perfect understanding, total control. Those don't exist, no matter how intelligent you are. So the real shift is this: not using your intelligence to eliminate uncertainty, but learning to exist with it.